It was a time when empires ruled with iron fists, when men bore swords but hid their humanity. And in the shadows of Rome's opulent palaces, behind the marble columns and velvet curtains, existed a world rarely spoken of, a world of those forced to serve not out of duty, but by desire imposed on them. This is the untold story of Tiberius, a young man whose beauty became his curse, and whose life as a male concubine in ancient Rome remains a chilling reminder of what cruelty can. Wear the mask of luxury. Tiberius was born to a poor family in the province of Thrace, where winters were cruel and summers unforgiving. His father, a once proud soldier turned farmer, struggled to feed his 4 children. Among them, Tiberius was the youngest, barely 12 when he first caught the attention of a Roman tax collector passing through their village. The man had paused. When he saw him, this boy with olive skin, deep black eyes, and a quiet grace that no 12-year-old should possess. The collector returned weeks later, but this time with soldiers. Tiberius' family resisted, but against trained Roman guards, resistance was a dream easily shattered. They dragged him away screaming, while his mother wailed until her voice broke. That would be the last time he'd see her. They transported him to Rome like a prized possession, kept in chains but treated with a strange reverence. Once in the capital, he was bathed, perfumed, and dressed in silks, alien to his skin. Slaves whispered around him that he was being prepared for something called the Domus Aurea, the Golden House. The Golden House of Emperor Nero was not just a palace. It was a realm of decadence, of performances where people played parts not on a stage, but in life itself. And Tiberius was about to be assigned his role, not as a servant, not as a gladiator, but something more intimate. And more terrifying, he was sold to a Roman nobleman named Gaius Marcellus, known in whispers among slaves as the Collector. Gaius had a taste for beauty, especially the kind that feared him. Tiberius, at just 13, became one of many concubines kept in a hidden chamber beneath Gaius' villa. This chamber had no windows, only walls painted with scenes of gods and nymphs. A cruel irony for boys who would never feel sunlight again. Their days followed strict rituals: wake, bathe, train in poetry, dance, and obedience. Their nights? That was when the chamber doors opened, and they were summoned one by one. Tiberius learned quickly not to cry. Gaius hated tears. He wanted submission wrapped in silence. Those who resisted were never seen again. Years passed in that gilded prison. Tiberius turned 17, then 18. He watched others come and go. Some aged out and were discarded. Others tried to escape and were publicly punished to set examples. Hope, for Tiberius, had long been buried beneath fear. But what made it worse was that, with time, he began to forget his real name. He was only called Elias, a name Gaius had given him one night, during Saturnalia, a Roman festival of chaos and indulgence. Tiberius was ordered to serve a group of senators. Among them was a man named Decimus, younger than the others and quieter. While others drank and demanded, Decimus simply watched. That night, after the party, he approached Tiberius alone and said, "You don't belong here. I see it in your eyes." It was the first kind word Tiberius had heard in years. For weeks after, Decimus found ways to speak to him in secret. He asked about his life, his memories, even the smell of Thracian pines. Slowly, Tiberius began to remember his brothers' laugh, his mother's songs. For the first time, something stirred inside him. Something that had died years ago. Hope. But hope in Rome was dangerous. Gaius noticed the change in him. Noticed the way he smiled when Decimus was mentioned, the way his eyes lifted even slightly. Gaius, consumed by possessive fury, made a show of his power. One evening, he paraded all the concubines into the central hall and asked Tiberius to choose one to be punished. Tiberius refused. So Gaius chose for him a boy named Ciro, barely 15. They made Tiberius watch. That night, the chamber was silent. No one cried. No one spoke. Because they had learned, the pain of one could become the punishment of all. But Decimus did not abandon him. He bribed a guard, slipped notes through trays of food, and finally revealed his plan to buy Tiberius's freedom. It was a risk punishable by death. But Decimus was willing to try. The night of the escape was cold and raining. Tiberius, heart pounding, followed the directions he'd memorized 100 times. The guard unlocked his chains and nodded once. He ran through tunnels, past hidden corridors, finally reaching the gate behind the villa where Decimus waited. With a cloak and a horse, but freedom came with a cost. The second Tiberius stepped outside, arrows rained down. It was a trap. Decimus had been betrayed. He fell first, struck in the chest. Tiberius screamed and reached for him, but guards seized him. Gaius arrived moments later, calm, smiling. He looked at Tiberius and whispered, "Now you understand. You are mine." Tiberius was dragged back in chains, not just across marble floors, but across the shards of hope. The sight of Decimus lying lifeless on the cobblestones haunted him, his eyes frozen mid-promise. Gaius didn't punish Tiberius with whips or chains that night. Instead, he ordered silence. No food, no contact, no sound. For a week, Tiberius sat in darkness, starving, shivering, alone. And Gaius visited him only once. He knelt beside the broken boy and whispered, "When a man forgets his place, Rome reminds him." What broke inside Tiberius was not just his body. It was his last thread of faith, in kindness, in change, in rescue. He returned to the concubine's chamber as a shell. No one asked him questions. No one spoke of Decimus. Fear now wore the skin of silence. But something strange happened in the months that followed. Gaius, perhaps believing Tiberius had truly been broken, began to trust him more. He was allowed to attend events, serve elite guests, even travel to estates beyond Rome. The leash was longer, but it was still a leash. And yet, Tiberius was learning. Watching, waiting. He learned the names of those who secretly despised Gaius, the rival senators, the envious generals, the ambitious merchants who smiled to his face and cursed him behind his back. Tiberius stored every detail like a soldier mapping enemy lines. And then came the plague. A sickness swept through Rome like divine punishment. Rich and poor alike perished. Temples overflowed with prayers and pyres with bodies. Among the first to fall ill was Gaius. Tiberius was ordered to remain by his side, to bathe him, feed him, comfort him. In those final fevered days, Gaius clutched Tiberius's arm and whimpered like a child, not out of regret, but fear of death. He said, "They'll take everything when I'm gone, but not you. You're mine even in death." But death came anyway, and with it, a silence that felt almost sacred. When Gaius died, chaos erupted in his villa. Servants fled. Soldiers looted. The concubines were forgotten, no longer desired, no longer owned. For the first time, Tiberius stood in the garden alone, unchained. But freedom, he realized, is not just the absence of walls. It's the presence of choice that he didn't run. Not immediately. He went back underground, found the other boys, some now young men. Together, they buried the ones who hadn't survived the plague. Then he left Rome that he wandered for years. In the eastern provinces, he passed as a scholar, teaching languages and poetry. In Alexandria, he worked at a library, copying scrolls. No one asked about his past, and he never offered it. But in his dreams, he still saw Decimus, still heard the thrum of Roman drums, still felt the cold kiss of marble on his back. Years later, he returned to Rome. Not as a slave, not as a concubine, but as a ghost who had outlived his chains. He wrote a manuscript anonymously. In it, he described not names, not direct accusations, but truths hidden in symbols and allegories. He called it The Garden Beneath the Palace. It spoke of boys who bloomed in darkness, of men who sowed pain in silk, of a city that devoured innocence and called it celebration. Whispers of the book spread among Rome's elite. Some dismissed it as fiction. Others recognized it as a mirror and looked away. Tiberius, now in his 40s, lived in a quiet cottage beyond the city's reach. He tended to stray animals, grew herbs, and helped orphan children find homes. When he looked at them, he saw himself, not as he had been, but as he could have been. One evening, a traveler arrived at his door, a young man who introduced himself as Marcus. He said he had read the book. He said it saved him. Tiberius smiled for the first time in weeks, because in a world that had once tried to erase him, someone remembered, someone learned. And that, he realized, was its own kind of justice. Not all chains are made of iron, and not all scars are visible, but the ones who survive, The ones who dare to tell their stories become more than victims. They become the memory Rome couldn't kill. Tiberius never returned to the Golden House. It had been rebuilt, repainted, repopulated. But in his heart, its foundations remained, a warning carved into his soul that he once whispered, sitting beneath an olive tree.